Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name's Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 60th episode this week, as we will be recapping another Patriots loss, this time to the Miami Dolphins, as well as previewing the upcoming game versus the New York Jets. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on the news of the day, as well as at our website at pats300levelpod.com. So, Kevin, another week. Another game where they're losing pretty big in the first half, find a way to come back at the end, but it's just not enough. I said it last week. I'll say it again. Same shit, different day for the fourth straight year. What were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I think frustrating, I think, is the biggest thing, just because you see that they have the pieces there to do it and they just can't string it together.
Yep.
Where it's been even the tail of last year, and 2021 as well, where they just make that mistake when it's kind of like a grenade offense or even the great team where they're doing something, all of a sudden they shoot themselves in the foot, or they blow off their leg by clicking the pin by accident. So it's just
Even
it really
2022.
yeah, it's just really frustrating where you see that they have the pieces and way to actually do it, because they went toe to toe with the Eagles. They should have beaten the Eagles. They should have beaten the Dolphins. They had just too many mistakes each time. And usually you would say that, oh, it's only the last, let's say, 10 years or so. They don't come out of the gate strong, because they really use the first 4 weeks as an extension of preseason training camp. But just the way it's been in the last few years is that they start out slow, sloppy, and they don't really ever clean it up, where they always keep making mistakes. So it's one thing to say, well, it's something they've done historically, where maybe it's not the worst thing in the world, and that's what I'm still hoping for. But just the fact that it's happened over and over in the last few years and it hasn't really corrected itself, that's where I'm a little bit more concerned. But you never know. We have Bill O'Brien here. We have why am I blanking on his name? The offensive
Adrian
line
Clem.
coach, Adrian Clem, where maybe having them here will help kind of right that wrong and fix the mistakes and make sure that if they do happen, they won't happen again.
Yeah.
Like the Douglas fumble, like the just like sloppy play that they have overall. And I think that's really the biggest thing coming out of this game. I just didn't really feel good, even when they were coming back, that they were actually going to be able to succeed and end up winning this game. Just because you texted me during the game where they're going to make a drive and they're going to lose at the end.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think I think
exactly what happened.
the exact tweet, I forgot who tweeted out. I think it might have been Trevor Porter. Was something along the lines of at halftime, big losing big at halftime again. They're going to reload, find a way to come back, and then lose right at the end, which is
Mm-hmm.
exactly what they did. But
Yeah, so there are some good things that have come out of this game. Where you could definitely say Christian Gonzalez, the pass defense, really being down to just really one real cornerback, and being able to hold Miami's receivers in that game. And then even Mac Jones, I would say we're gonna get to him in a little bit, but I still think that he's still showing a lot more progression than it was last year. So I think you do have something there that you can continue working with and see.
yep. No, I agree. And it's frustrating, like you said. It's just another game, another in the past few years, we used to say uncharacteristic Patriots mistakes, but if it's
Mm-hmm.
the fourth straight year, I don't know if it's uncharacteristic anymore. But it's mistakes that are losing them games, and it is early in the season. You don't have as much training camp, preseason practices as you used to before the 2011 collective bargaining agreement. So you can contribute part of the sloppiness to that, but at some point, it has to turn around. And 2021, they started 1-3. They were sloppy. I think they were about 4-5 at one point, something like that. Then they went on a 7-game winning streak and were in first place with going into their bye at the end of the season. Then something happened. They didn't play well the rest of the season, but we have seen them even post Brady turn it around. But starting out 0-2, you're not in a good position to start. And Jets coming up this upcoming week. I know they have Zach Wilson, who they've characteristically beaten pretty well, but the Jets do have a good defense at least. Then you have a tough match in the Cowboys who have been playing well. So you have to start winning games and you have to start soon. You can't wait till week 5, 6, or 7 to start turning around, especially since you dug yourself into a hole this big this early on.
Yep. All right. Going on to offense. So again, I think there's a few things you can really go over there. One, the biggest part is the offensive line. I think that's what's really driving this offense to not really look so good. Where the running game is looking good, the passing game is looking very rushed. I think it's affecting Bill O'Brien, and I think he's kind of calling the game a little bit tepid. Where there's times where there was a ton of 2nd and 1s where in all Patriots history, all of really any sort of football IQ, you say 2nd and 1. Well, that's pretty much a given that you should be able to convert that. So you take a shot play and you try and get big yardage there. And then if you don't convert, then you could convert on 3rd and 1. But I don't think that they really trusted their line to really hold up for those long plays. And I also don't think they trusted the line to be able to convert 1 yard in 1 down, which is a little scary. So I think the line is really affecting kind of the different plays that Bill O'Brien can call and how the game is really played. And it affects the running game because they couldn't run the ball 2nd straight week in a row. And Ramondre is one of the probably the top 10 backs in the league. And he's not able to really do anything right now. And then the time that Mac has to throw, he has the 33rd time to throw in all of NFL. So not even 32nd. There's 32 teams in the league. He's got the 33rd time to throw in the league, which is just insane. So in the way that he's looking to actually, I think, look as good as he's looking, getting the amount of yards and completion percentage, I think is actually really, I think he's playing better than he could even expect with someone that little bit of time to throw and that much pressure.
Yeah. With the weapons he has.
Yeah.
Whereas Tua was throwing the ball out in 2 seconds, but again, he has the fastest skill position in all of football, 2 of the fastest wide receivers in all of football, who are also 2 of the top 8 wide receivers in football too. So it's not like Mac has those weapons, just a bad offensive line. So I agree with everything you're saying. The offense hasn't looked up to par. It has, in my opinion, it has actually looked better than it was last year with Patricia, which is at least a plus,
Oh, yeah,
even
no
with
shit.
the offensive line deficiencies. And it's only week 2, so there's hope that as the season goes on, they'll continue to grow and get better. With O'Brien being a great call player, great coordinator, and great teacher as well, so you would think that will help correct some of the mistakes. But we saw them moving the ball. And that I think that's the frustrating part too, where they got into I think they got into past the 50, I think 7 times,
And
or it
they
was 7 times
converted
the
it
last
like
2 games.
30% of the time or something like
Yeah,
that.
I think 7 times the last 2 games, and they only scored a touchdown once, something like that.
But when
So
they've been in the red zone, they've scored, I think, 70-something% of the time.
yeah,
So
in the red zone they've been good, but once they get past the 50-yard line, I think it's 30% or something like that, where it's that one they're moving the ball well, they're playing really well, and then there's a missed block by Cole Strange, which ends the drive. There's the Demario Douglas fumble, which ends the drive, and they're moving the ball, which we didn't really see as much the last few years. It's not as much 3 and outs, so that is positive, but they have to stop with the mistakes, and if they keep moving the ball without the mistakes, they'll be in a good position. But Sunday just wasn't. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I was saying too. And I think that's a really good thing to bring up here as well, where they're playing right now based on, I think, also because of the offensive line. They're trying to compile these 12 to 15 play drives where they're going maybe 5-10 yards a spot. And this team right now isn't built to do that, where that's going to be their bread and butter if they're all on the same page and they're clean. But the problem is when you're doing a 5 to 10 yard kind of drive and it's taking 10 to 15 plays, you're just opening up yourself for more potential for mistakes. Where if it's a quick drive, you're getting like 20-yard chunks to play. There's less plays that you can make mistakes on. So that's just one thing where they're just not clean enough where they can get through by having these long drawn out drives. They need some of those chunk plays, and something they're not really getting right now. The biggest part is the offensive line, but I think they're just too afraid as well because of how bad the line's played to even try and dial up some of those. I mean, you see every once in a while they'll do a deep throw, but none of them are really that close because he just hasn't had the time to do it. But they need to kind of um what's it called, scheme up some way to get some larger chunk plays. And I think they'll get to one thing where also I feel like everyone's on the same page of this except for the Patriots coaches, would be just Douglas's fumble where he fumbled the ball.
I need to address what you said first before
Yep.
we move on to the next segment. Which I do agree. I think part of the reason why they were trying to go with those 15 play drives was scheme of who they were going up against.
Hmm.
Going up against the first 2 weeks, two of the more explosive offenses in football, the Eagles, who have AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. If you're moving the ball and scoring quick, you're giving the ball right back to them, and you're going to possibly get into a shootout, which is what they're trying to avoid. So by doing those long, drawn out drives, you help shorten the game, which gives your team a higher chance of success in winning the game. Granted, like you said, having the offensive line in the position that it is, having these key mistakes, ending drives, and not scoring or being in scoring position because you're not getting those chunk plays, I think is a important consideration. And I think they might start to try more of those big plays this upcoming week versus the Jets, since they don't really they have Garrett Wilson, but other than that, they don't really have those key guys that are going to beat you outside of Wilson. And we've known Bill to be able to take out an opponent's best target. So I think that's part of the reason why they were doing that, is they wanted to shorten the game to give the team the best chance to win.
Right. And I think the other big part of that is also just the Douglas situation where he fumbles the ball. He's not seen again other than punt returns. I think everyone, I think, is pretty much, I don't think there's really many that really agree with the situation, where I think in years past, it's perfectly fine to do it and get away with it. It's just that this team isn't talented enough on offense yet. To do that, where he's your biggest playmaker right now. He's the quickest guy in your team. He's the fastest guy in your team. And he can actually get those chunk plays where you see him when even that the play ended up fumbling it. It was on a short low crosser. He was going to get like 15, 20 yards and then ended up getting hit from behind there. So it is one thing where you do need to teach him a lesson that ball control is really important. But I think you really sacrificed the whole kind of team in that situation for the whole game. I could see a quarter, or like a drive or two, just to get that in him. But I don't really like the total game, for him for that.
No, I agree completely. That was one thing I didn't agree with at the time. And the other thing too is if you're going to bench him, at least be consistent. They had him returning punts, but not in on offense, where
Mhm.
at least in my opinion, I feel like it's a higher likelihood of him fumbling, trying to return a punt, muffing a punt, or being tackled on a punt return
Mhm.
than as a wide receiver. So I'd understand one or the you can't really do one or the other. It's either all benched or let him
Mhm.
play.
Yep. No, agree completely. Defense, real quick here. I think overall they played really well. Especially they held Tua throwing to both Hill and Waddle. Hill had, I think, what, 40 yards,
Yep.
and then Waddle had 87 yards for like 5 catches or something like that.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I think
and
combined they were not let me double check, but I think it's
Mhm.
9 catches for 120 something
Mhm.
yards.
So
Yeah,
they
9 catches for 126 yards.
so they pretty much ended up doing what they sought to do, is stop those two biggest things. What ended up happening because of that was that they did get a decent amount of yards from the running back, but I think that's what they were willing to do. We saw that years ago when they faced Denver, and they ended up for No Show Marino, they ended up giving like 200 something yards to, because they were willing to give up that many yards to him, whereas they limited the ball for Peyton Manning. So I think that was really their game plan. I think it worked really well. I think it would have worked um, even better if the offense could have actually scored points, because 24 points is a ton of points to give up on defense.
Yeah.
There was that one large chunk play that they got. It was a 40 something yard run,
Yeah.
where there was two whiffed kind of hits on there, from Peppers, and I think it was Map who was the other player that took a wrong route.
I
But
believe Duggar took a wrong route from the safety position.
So it was really just safety play overall, not one play particular that was pretty bad. But you take that one play out, I think overall they played really well, especially with their corner situation.
Yep.
Marcus Jones ended up getting hurt. Was it the first quarter?
Yep.
And they were down to basically just Christian Gonzalez and Miles Bryant, who's not really a great cornerback. He doesn't really play outside, but he handles his own. Other
Yep.
than one play to Waddle, but Gonzalez, I think, really stepped up there and showed you what he had. So,
Yeah.
um,
Speaking of Miles Bryant, because I was going to bring it up if you didn't, but I know a lot of people. He was a good second year player when he was playing sparingly. He had the big, I believe, pass breakup against the Bills in the
mhm,
crazy win game. But the last couple of years after that, he kind of got exposed a lot, especially
mhm.
by Isaiah McKenzie or some faster receivers. And a lot of Patriots fans didn't really want him on the team, but he's held his own and has actually played really well the first two
Mhm,
games. Like you said, there was one misplay on, I believe it was Waddle or Hill, that he allowed
mhm,
a chunk play, but he was in good position, and he's actually played pretty well. Especially he's mostly only played the slot, but having to move outside for this
mhm.
game and still holding his own, being able to be a good tackler, wrapping up, making some good hits. I've been very pleasantly surprised with him so far.
Yeah, I think his tackling has been his best kind of part that he's shown. He's had some actually good hits too.
Yeah.
So, was really happy with that. Anything else on the defense?
I think with the one thing going into the game, what the Dolphins didn't have their left tackle in Armstead, who's one of the best left tackles in the league. They also had Isaiah Wynn at left guard. So looking into that, I was expecting or hoping that they'd be able to get some pressure. With the Patriots having a really good front seven, with on the line you have Uche, Barmore, what am I missing? Keon White, Judon, etc. Wise. But Tua was just getting the ball out so quickly that the pass rush didn't really have a chance. So that was one thing with having receivers that fast. The pass rush wasn't really able to affect the game. But I'm hoping that in weeks to come when they play other teams that they're able to make their presence known. But that was one thing I was hoping for, especially with the Dolphins injuries up front. But Tua just was pretty much did everything he was asked of and got the ball 3 steps out, and throwing it that fast. There's nothing a pass rush can even do.
Mhm. All right. Next thing, before we get to 3 up 3 down, was just replay inconsistency. We saw this on two really major plays. One of them, it didn't really hurt them, just
Yeah,
other than losing a challenge and actually losing a timeout there. So I guess it did
yeah,
actually technically hurt them. But was the Stevenson. I think it was Stevenson, right?
yeah. Stevenson.
So Stevenson was the run. They ended up calling him short. It was clear he actually made it over the
Yeah,
line. And then they said there wasn't enough evidence to overturn the play. And then the following one was
Cole
the
Strange.
Secchi to Strange lateral, and they originally gave him the first down, and then said that there was enough evidence to overturn the play. Where honestly, there really wasn't um, that much evidence there for it. So
Yeah,
if you're saying there wasn't enough evidence for the Stevenson one, how was there enough evidence with the Cole Strange play? And I think that was really called inconsistently. But the other thing where, again, yes, that did affect the game, but they also should have been there in that situation to begin with as well. So you can't go blaming the rest on this. The Patriots didn't really deserve to win this anyway, based
yeah,
on how they played. But that was very frustrating where it could have continued. And who knows, they probably would have ended up losing anyway. So
yeah.
um,
No, I agree, and that's the thing is if it was just the Cole Strange play on its own, if the Stevenson didn't have thing happen,
mhm,
say okay, I don't agree with it because on replay it looked like he might have been short, but
mhm,
you typically need conclusive evidence, and a play like that, the camera angles can affect
mhm,
the vantage point, so it's a little tough. But it's okay, I get it. But the Stevenson one, he was clearly over, and they said there wasn't enough evidence to overturn it. So if they didn't
mhm.
have enough evidence for that, I don't see how they could have enough evidence on the Cold Strange one. So
Yeah.
for me, as the frustrating part, it's just the inconsistency that if you call one, you can't call the other.
Mhm.
Um, But I think before we get to our next segment of 3 up, 3 down, I think the one thing that actually did impress me a little bit with this game, though, was pretty much for most of it, it felt like the Patriots were out of it entirely, where the Dolphins were pretty much having their way with the Patriots.
Mhm.
Patriots didn't really seem like they had a shot, but yet right at the end, they still had a chance to win it. Whereas in years past, when games got like this, you kind of felt like it was over and there wasn't really anything the Patriots could do, both offensively or defensively. I think back to the 49ers game or the Rams game in 2020,
Mhm.
where they got destroyed, even though the score wasn't, they didn't lose by like 40. They
Mhm.
lost, I think, both games by 20, but it never felt like they had a shot.
Mhm.
There were some games the past few years as well, but this time it kind of felt like that the first 2.5 quarters, but they
Mhm.
still had a chance at the end. So I guess that was encouraging in a very frustrating and trying to see some silver lining in a frustrating
Mhm.
loss. But
Yep. All right. 3 up, 3 down, real quick. So I'll just go first. I'll list them all and give a little brief thing, but not really too much. So I got Christian Gonzalez, Brendan Schooler, and Matt Jones. So Gonzalez, again, he played really well with Tyreek Hill. Has played really well the last 2 games and has really shown that he's probably gonna be the steal of the draft. He looks like he's a top 5, top 10
one of
player
the
in the
two
draft,
yeah, one of the two steals of the draft.
other than Keenan White.
I still think Keon White too. I think getting Gonzo at 17 is a huge steal, but also
Mhm.
being able to get both Gonzo and Keon White, Keon in the second round, who was supposed to be a
Mhm.
first rounder, and not having to trade up to get either one of them.
Mhm. Brandon Schooler is basically on that ended up drawing up field goal block, which if you haven't seen already, which pretty much everyone has already, you should check out the Pat McAfee breakdown of that because he could break it down much better than I ever could. He's got the video and everything like that. So it's just a really cool way that they kind of drew that up and figured it out based on having Jake Bailey play here before. So that was really nice to kind of see. And then Mac Jones, I think as much as everyone hates him, and you see all the hate from around the like the fair weather fans, and the
Hey,
people in the crowds and everything like that. I think he actually played. He's playing really well for the situation he has around him right now. And you actually look at his stats and his yards, and he's actually really up there. And usually around the top 10 for all the different metrics there are out there that benefit a quarterback. So I think I'm hoping that it's going to look a lot better going forward once they clean everything up around him. So that way he could really start showing off some of the other stuff he has. But even his throws on the run, where he's making those plays outside of like script. So I think he looked really well in that, and he's surprising people with his athleticism. Where we've been saying the last 2 years or whatever, where he's more athletic than he gets the credit for. So he is actually a lot quicker than he actually people think he is. He's not like Tom Brady. He's not like Drew Bledsoe. He's not one of those statues back there. So I think that was really nice to see.
yeah, I think those are all good picks and similar to mine. My first one's Christian Gonzalez, which, as you pretty much said, he's had some very tough tasks the first 2 weeks going up against some of the best wide receivers in football, and held his own. And not only held his own, pretty much dominated at times,
Mm-hmm.
having an interception, limiting them to not many catches or yards or any big
Mm-hmm.
plays. So for a rookie who you got in the mid first round, and he's playing excellent. He should have a shot at rookie of the year, at least through the first 2 games, but we'll have to wait and see how he translates the rest of the season. But
Mm-hmm.
very encouraging for the first 2 games. My number two, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, is Miles Bryant. He was put in a situation where was more outside what we've seen, and he held his own and has played really well the first 2 weeks. In the past, like we said, he's mostly only played slot with a little bit of safety, but having to move to outside against some of the best wide receivers in football this past week and playing really well. I've been very impressed with him, especially since they were down 3 of their top 5 cornerbacks as well. And then Mac Jones is number 3. Like you said, he's been for the situation he's in with a very bad offensive line versus bad slash unhealthy offensive line versus 2 very good defensive fronts, and the skill position they have at football at wide receiver, who at least aren't right now aren't playing at the top of their game yet in this system. He's really impressed me. He's been able to step up in the pocket better than he did last year. I thought he was very good as a rookie, but last year took a little bit of a step back in that respect. But this year he's been doing very well at that, getting the ball out, moving on the run. Even that throw where he was on the run, it was
To
incomplete
his
to
left
Gesicki.
to Gasecki.
Yeah. I thought that was a really good throw in Gasecki. I'd have to see the all 22 of it to see if Gasecki stopped or slowed down a little bit, but that seemed like a really good throw that we haven't seen that type of throw from him in the past. So I've been very impressed with him. And then Brandon Schooler's just an honorable mention for the plays he's made so far too.
All right. Moving down. 3 down. I've got offensive line, safety over pursuit, and Devontae Parker with an honorable mention of Douglas. So offensive line was terrible. We already talked about nothing much to really mention. I couldn't really I would have just listed everyone there. So safety over pursuit again. There's that running play overall, and there were a couple other instances where they did take wrong routes to the running back or the throw in the flat. And that needs to be cleaned up, obviously. Parker, I just think he was being too much of a baby going up against Howard on the interception that Mac threw, where as a boundary wide receiver, you shouldn't be having the cornerback get position on you there. And if anything, you got to throw him either out of bounds or you at least need to get your way in there so that way you can at least get a hand for the ball. He didn't have a chance. So he didn't really take control of the situation, and he wasn't physical enough there. And you
This
have
is
to
the
realize the
second straight year
situation.
that exact same thing happened.
Yep.
Last year, in the beginning of the season, same exact thing. He got out muscled by Xavier Howard, which led to an interception on a play that if he was stronger and went more towards the ball, should have been an incompletion. It shouldn't have been an interception. But
Yeah.
this game specifically, that specific play was just something that he can't let happen.
And I was saying before, I would be willing to bet if Booty was in that situation, and I don't think he hasn't shown really anything yet, other than his size and that he's willing to push off of people, which we've seen. I don't think that he would have allowed that to be an interception. I think he would have probably thrown Howard out of bounds and then gotten offensive pass interference on there. But at least it wouldn't have been an interception. I would take a 5-yard OPI there rather than an interception. So. That can't be done. And then Douglas, you just can't fumble in that spot. It was a tough fumble just because the guy came from behind and hit it out really hard. But it did kind of really change the whole game. Douglas being out the rest of the time, they were getting momentum there, and it was really kind of shot down from there.
No, I think those are all good. I think for me, even though you had offensive line as a whole category, I'm just going specifically Cole Strange number 1, Calvin Anderson number 2, and then I'd probably go David Andrews number 3. Just all 3 of them are my 3 down. The Patriots got manhandled on the inside and at right tackle too, which Calvin Anderson, I know it's a little unfair. He's not really a right tackle. He's played most of his career at left tackle, I believe. And he's also missed pretty much all of camp with an illness, and so he's just getting back to strength. But he had a really good week 1 versus the Eagles versus a very good front 7, and for him to take a step back like that, he was just getting manhandled by what's his name, Vin
Jefferson, Vin Ginkel or something like that.
yeah
Vin
Van
Ginkel.
Ginkel, Van Ginkel, who is a starter on the team, but isn't really. He's more of a backup edge player. So for someone that doesn't really play that position as much, he's more of a role utility type player. He was looking like an all pro in the game. And for someone that played as well as they did week 1, wasn't perfect week 1, but to look like that against backup, pretty much put the team in a bad position. Cole Strange looked lost, which again, it might not be fair for him too, because he hasn't played a game in 9 months, but he was just made some wrong decisions, which led to the first drive ending and was just getting manhandled all over. And then the same went with David Andrews too. David Andrews just didn't have a good game. And the Dolphins' pressure up the middle is what pretty much resulted in the Dolphins winning that first drive ending. And then even that 4th and 3, where it was to Gesicki to Cole Strange, the pressure got up the middle where Mac couldn't take a step into the throw. He had to release it right away, falling back, because if he tried to step into it, it would have either been hit, sacked, fumbled, or picked. So that's something they're going to have to correct going forward.
All right. Moving on. Three questions, kind of around the league or random ones, overall. So first one, I'll let you kind of handle these because you wrote the first two.
So first question, typically we know that with the Patriots, they usually have a slow start because um like we said earlier, there's less practices, there's less preseason games, uh less training camp versus years past ever since the 2011 collective bargaining agreement. So we've seen them have slow starts and then they turn things around midway through the season and then they're usually fine. However, this is the third straight year that they have at least 2 losses in the first 4 games. The last 2 years, or fourth straight year, they had at least 2 losses in the first 4 games. Last 2 years, they started 1-3. Should they do something to change their approach to make sure that they start faster? I'm not sure what it really would be, so that's why I'm asking you. But if you start in a hole like this to begin with, just like we've seen the first 2 games, where it's kind of a good analogy where they start down 16 points, 14 points, it's tough to make your way back. And we've seen the last 2 games they weren't able to. In 2021, they were able to make the playoffs. Last year, they were just 1 game away from making it, even with the whole shit show on offense. So do you think there's something that they should do differently going into next year to make sure that they don't keep having these slow starts to begin the year?
Yeah, they definitely need to look into that, and what it is, I don't really know. Maybe playing they typically the last few years they haven't played much in the preseason, and maybe that's the biggest thing, where that's the closest kind of replication to game speed that you can get. Because even in joint practices, I don't really think you get all of that full kind of game speed, and you can't do as much tackling there as you can in an actual game. So I think just the little amount of time they've seen the field in preseason, maybe play more players there. I think that's kind of the thing I would start. I don't think there's really many instances where you could say they didn't have as many practices as they could have. Because I think they used up all their pad practices, but if they haven't, then obviously go there as well. So
Yeah,
they
I
definitely need to
agree.
change something.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know what you do differently, but I think there's something they have to do. Like you said, I think playing in the preseason might be the best way just so that they can get that game experience earlier. Granted, you risk injuries, which could have a detrimental effect to the season too, but if you're out of it before the season really even begins, or having as big of a hole as you have the past few years, maybe it's worth it. I'll get to I think one fair point though is we've seen this year especially is at least the good thing for the Patriots is a lot of the other better teams or competition have also had slow starts. Bills lost week 1. Chargers are 0-2. Granted, their coach is an idiot, so that kind of helps them. Bengals are 0-2. So it's not like there's a lot of teams they're fighting for the playoffs with are 2-0. Raiders are 1-1. Chiefs are 1-1. So that gives them at least a chance where they're not too far behind to begin with, but they have to win this week versus the Jets. If they go down to 0-3 going into week 4 versus the Cowboys, they're going to be in trouble, or could
Yep.
be in big trouble.
All right, next one.
Next question. I've been thinking of this the past few weeks, just because Bill is getting older. Not thinking of it because of what the Felger and Maz were saying yesterday or anything, but if and when Bill Belichick retires or steps away, I'm thinking it's going to be in 3 years after he passes the wins record. Assuming your coaching staff is still in place and they haven't gone elsewhere, do you hand the reins over to Bill O'Brien, Gerard Mayo, or someone else, possibly Steve Belichick, or assuming Mike Vrabel isn't available, or even if he is?
I would say Vrabel, number one, if he's available, because he's proven it that he can win, especially with no quarterback. So, I would say Vrabel. If
But
not,
assuming Vrabel is
then
not available.
assuming Vrabel's not available, I'd go Bill O'Brien just because he did it in Texas, in Houston, and the only thing that got him in trouble in Houston, where I think he realized it too, and it's not something he even wanted really control of, was just I wouldn't have him control of player personnel. So, I would say Bill O'Brien if it weren't Vrabel.
I agree. I'd go Vrabel first, but I don't think he's going to be available. So if that's the case, then Bill O'Brien. But I'll throw in a curveball. What are your thoughts on, let's say, one or two, both O'Brien and or Mayo go elsewhere in the next 3 years? They get a coaching opportunity they can't
Mhm.
pass up. What would your thoughts be on handing the reins over to Steve?
Oh, that would never
Because
happen. I think they would go in a completely different direction if that's the case. I don't think they would want kind of the remnants of like Bill's family still here. I don't think.
what if, let me add another caveat. I don't know how likely this is, but let's say the Patriots have success over the next 3 years,
Hmm.
either win a Super Bowl or get close to it. And Bill says, I'll retire, but I want Steve to take over and I'll mentor him and give him advice and everything. You'll keep what's his name? Mac Rowe in
Hmm.
the player personnel position. So pretty much everything stays the same, and I'll stay on as an advisor for Steve.
I don't think that would have happened because I don't think Bill would want to do that because we've seen in the kind of documentaries with him and Parcells. That's one of the things that he didn't like about what Parcells was doing. I don't think he'd want really anything of that. So I think when Bill is done, he's going to be done, and I think he wants to see it run really well after the fact. So I don't think it'll be. I don't think Steve would have any shot, nor would I don't think he would even want a shot either, based on how he kind of seems.
Okay.
All right, last question, real quick, because everyone's been talking about this, and I honestly have no idea what to do after number two.
Same.
But redraft the quarterbacks taken in 2021. It's based on we've seen Fields sucks and looks like he may be done.
I still don't
Zach,
understand how everyone was saying that he's an MVP candidate going
yeah,
into this year.
and then Zach Wilson, we know doesn't know what he's doing. And Trey Lance. So I'll go first, and the thing that's really tough with this is that the coaching situations that these players went into where that's the biggest thing about how can it really affect a player's development. You look at Trevor Lawrence's first year, he looked terrible, but that you look at the head coach that he had, and then look what happens when he got Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson's an offensive guru. So I would say Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones. I think that's everyone's consensus, 1 and 2.
I
Um,
want to go everyone. A lot of people still hate on Mac Jones right now, but
they
I
do, but
think
I
a
don't really know
rational
who
fan
they
would
would.
say
Mhm.
that order.
So then this is really it depends on how you really want to go and what you think. Um, the the next one that has the most talent would be Zach Wilson. Well, Zach Wilson has more talent than Mac Jones, I would say, other than his mind. But if you think you can get a lot out of him, the thing about Zach Wilson that turns me off is that he wasn't a captain when he was in college. Then that was one of the things that turned a lot of teams actually off about him, because most quarterbacks would be that. And it kind of seems like he's not mature enough. So I'm going, and this is probably out of left field. I'm going to go Davis Mills, number 3, because we saw actually what he could do his first rookie year when he actually had a head coach that was actually performing really well. And then you look at a situation, he had Lovey Smith, and that was basically a whole tank situation where they were, I think, originally going to try and get Flores, and then the whole lawsuit happened. So um, I think Mills does have a little bit more to show. He's smart. He's more of a game manager like Mac. Uh, and then the other ones, they need the right coaching, the right situation. It's not something you would pick one overall unless you're one of those teams that have it. So usually those are later in the rounds, not someone that's early enough. Um, so I have Fields, Wilson, Lance. Lance obviously is going to be the last one taken because he's the rawest of them all. Um, you could win me over by kind of flip flopping Mills, Fields, and Wilson anywhere else. Fields doesn't look. I never really thought that he was going to have that much success.
Same.
Um, Wilson has the talent, he just doesn't have the mind, and that's really important. Mills has the mind, he just doesn't have the talent of the other two. So, what did you say?
I'd go Trevor Lawrence first, Mac second, and I think that's pretty much consistent with what I was saying even pre-draft 2021. Excuse me. Um, granted, we didn't have our podcast until before the season started, so we didn't have these recorded. But I thought Wilson was going to be a bust, but he also wasn't put in a position to succeed. I thought Fields was going to be a bust, and Lance was just a wild card because he didn't really. He took the year off before he was in D1 AA. So right now, I'd still go Trevor Lawrence 1, Mac 2. I'd probably go Wilson 3 just because of the talent that he has. Granted, I said this from the beginning. He was brought in and didn't have a veteran quarterback. He didn't have an offensive coach. If he had, for someone like that, I think a position where he could have really succeeded was, granted, the the quarterback ahead of you might not have been good for your situation, but if he was in like how Jordan Love, for instance, was mentored for 3+ years behind Aaron Rodgers, where had a lot of talent but didn't really think he was going to be playing. So you pretty much sit him down. You're not going to be playing at least year one, maybe even year two, but you have so much talent. We really believe in you that once we feel you're ready, we're going to put you out there instead of throwing you to the wolves like the Jets have done with all their first round quarterbacks the last however many years, Mark Sanchez, Geno Smith, etc., and then just ruin them before they even have it, Sam Darnold, before they have a chance to really play. So that's why even if you get someone like a Brian Hoyer as a backup or someone like that, someone to help mentor them, show them what to do, what you're seeing on the field versus someone else. That's why I would still go with Wilson in 3, probably Fields 4 just because of the talent, even though I don't think Fields is that good. And then I guess now Mills than Lance, but I don't know. That's my thoughts. But again, a lot of these quarterbacks weren't put in a position to really succeed to begin with, which is what we see with a lot of teams when they draft quarterbacks. They're just they have internal pressure from up top to have them play for either the fans to get ticket sales or the GMs that drafted them, and the players don't really have a chance. They pretty much are set to fail before they really have a chance to begin.
All right. Moving on. Jets preview, real quick here.
Quick trivia question of the week.
Have it very, very quick.
The last time the Patriots have won 14 straight games versus the New York Jets. The last Jets win was December 2015. Who is the Jets starting quarterback?
Mark Sanchez?
No.
2015? Chad Pennington?
Chad Pennington was with the Dolphins in 2008 when the Dolphins won the division.
Oh, no idea then.
Fitzmagic.
Oh, yeah. All right. Jets preview, real quick. So Jets offense, like we said, with Aaron Rodgers being gone, Zach Wilson has not shown really any sort of growth whatsoever. He takes like 20 yards backwards before he ends up doing anything. The only thing he really looked good in last week was when he ended up just running. But you can't make a game out of that. He's not like Lamar Jackson to do that. So he's going to either get killed or he's going to start making fumbles. So the thing there, he doesn't really look that good. The two good aspects of their offense would be their running back room and then Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's really talented. He's the number one wide receiver, something that you wish that you would have for Mac Jones here. And then Breece Hall is really impactful, and they get Dalvin Cook as well. So two really good running backs there. So they're going to obviously run the ball a lot, and they're going to be targeting Garrett Wilson there. Everyone else, I'm not really too afraid of Allen Lazard or anything like that. So they'll probably have, depending on who's healthy or who's not. I realistically would just put Gonzalez on Wilson and then have your number two, probably Jonathan Jones, if he's healthy, go on Lazard. So it'd be interesting to see there. But obviously, they're probably going to just try and attack Garrett Wilson, and then the running back situation.
Yeah, I agree. And Gonzalez, especially if he's going up against Wilson, has a pretty tough task the first 3 weeks with the receivers he's going up against. But even though I think Wilson is a number one and is really good, I wouldn't put him still in the category of Waddle, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, or Tyreek Hill yet. I think he's just right below that. But again, he's their number one option by far. I think that if they're trying to throw the ball, they're going to try and throw it that way. And with Zach Wilson, what we've seen so far is I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised to see him predetermine some throws and
Mhm.
just throw it where he shouldn't be. So that should help the Patriots in some regard. Their running back room is good with Brees Hall and Dalvin Cook, and even Michael Carter's pretty good too.
Mhm.
Uh, Last year when the Patriots played the Vikings, they were the only team to hold Dalvin Cook below 2 yards per carry. And Cook ran for, I believe, 1,400 yards last year. So they had a good game plan versus him, a little different of a scheme with the Vikings ran versus the Jets. But that's something that I think the Patriots know that they're going to have to stop the run and stop Zach Wilson or stop Garrett Wilson and let anyone
Mhm.
else beat them. So I'm expecting the run defense to be better this week than it was last week. But again, like you said, part of it last week was probably by design. So I think the keys is make sure they don't get much yards on first and second down running the ball and just don't let Garrett Wilson beat you. And
Mhm.
then I don't think Lazard's good enough to, or McCole Hardman are good enough to be able to beat the Patriots single handedly. Their tight ends and CJ Uzma and Tyler Conklin are pretty good, but I don't think they're good enough that they can beat you single handedly either. So the keys to the game for the Patriots defense is to stop the running attack and take out Garrett Wilson and force Zach Wilson to be the Zach Wilson versus the Patriots the last 4 games.
Yep. The defense is really another story, though. Their defense is one of the top defenses in the league. They're really good about holding teams down. They got Sauce Gardner, who actually hasn't technically played that well this year, according to the stats. When you
He's
actually look
he's
at the
played better.
completion
It
percentage
depends on what
against.
stats you're looking at. Some
Hmm.
stats, yes, some no,
Hmm.
depending on how you define if it's man or zone or who's
Hmm.
covering who. But he has played pretty good. But again, probably not to the first team All Pro level he was last year.
Yeah. And they got DJ Reed. Quincy Williams is another big name that they've got. Quentin Williams, Quentin Jefferson. Lots of Quentins on this team. And John Franklin Myers. A whole bunch of this team's loaded on defense pretty much. So I think the biggest thing
CJ
on.
Mosley,
Oh, did I forget to mention him?
yeah,
Yeah.
one of
So
the best
they
linebackers in football.
Yeah, so they've got great linebackers, they've got great defensive line, great corners. Pretty much everyone on this defense is really good, and
Yeah,
that's not really surprising. Where you got Robert Saleh, who's a defensive-minded coach as well. So, the big thing here is just needing to find a way to score points. So the thing that's tough about here is what do you go with? You're gonna go with you can't go with either run or pass. It has to be kind of balanced because they're just good on all ends. So I think really the keys of this game is not really focusing so much on the Jets defense, so much as cleaning up what you've been doing wrong. So before you could focus on the Jets, you got to really focus on yourselves first. Um, so I think cleaning up the offensive line, cleaning up the mistakes, and then see what happens, and then just score enough points where you beat Zach Wilson because I don't think he's going to be scoring that many points.
yeah. No, I agree completely with that. And like you said, this is one of the best defenses in football. Mac Jones this week said that this is the best defense he's seen on tape. Uh, they're good in the front four. They're good at the linebacker position. They're good at the secondary with some really good corners, good safeties. So it just depends on how do you pick your poison of where you want to attack.
Mhm.
It depends, like you said, on the offensive line, how healthy they are. I would try and establish the run early so that if you're able to establish the run and then mix in some play action, you're going to keep the defense on its toes a little bit. And then that'll allow Mac and the receivers to have a little bit more advantage and some leverage. But again, if your offensive line isn't moving people off the line of scrimmage, you're not going to be able to establish the run. You're starting at 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10, second
Mhm.
and 12, and then you're putting yourself behind the line to begin with early. I would try that in the beginning to see how you do. But if it doesn't work well, I think you have to go to what you were doing the past few weeks of throwing the ball 40, 50 times, but
Mhm.
adding in some screens. One thing we actually didn't mention earlier, but I think the first two games of the season, every single time they were Mac Jones was under center, they ran the ball except
Mhm.
once, and I believe all the other times they were in shotgun, and that's something that Bill O'Brien alluded to a little bit when it was mentioned on Monday, was that they have to do a better job of mixing it up because if you see Mac Jones is under center the defense is going to know you're running the ball unless you use that to your advantage this week, where you're under center, make them think you're running the ball, but you're actually not, or do a play action, etc. But that's something they have to do a better job at. I think the last 2 weeks, part of the reason why they were in shotgun a lot when passing was that the offensive line wasn't good and they were playing a really good front seven. So you needed to give Mac Jones more time to throw and operate. But that's something they're going to have to clean up a little bit. It should be interesting to see what you do. I would just wouldn't target Sauce Gardner, whoever's covering him, just you're out of it this week essentially, unless they switch to zone or something like that. Maybe attack them once to keep him on his toes, but just try to look the other way. Look in the slot, look at the tight ends. I would think maybe a big game for the tight ends again this week. I know Gesicki and Henry had a good game last week receiving. Maybe try and target them over the middle again to take the secondary out of it a little bit, but should be interesting. Really intrigued to see what way they try and go to pick their poison.
All right. Going prediction time. Pats are favored by 2.5 points. Over under is 36.5. So I'll go first. I've got the Patriots winning 17-6. So I'm going to take the under, and I'm going to have them covering the spread pretty good there.
I have Patriots winning 27-10. I think they're going to get a couple touchdowns. I think the defense will get a score as well. And then they'll get into the red zone or field goal position. And actually, I'll change it to 24-10 with a missed field goal by Ryland. But I think the defense will get a score. I think they're going to still have a little trouble converting in the end. It is early. They are going up against good defense. But I don't see the Jets offense with Zach Wilson beating them, especially if they're able to take out Garrett Wilson and slow down the running attack, which I think they will be able to do. As long as they don't make too many mistakes and turn the ball over a lot. I thought this going into Miami too, so I don't know if that's a good thing, but I don't really see a way the Jets win unless the Patriots significantly lose the turnover margin.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review on Twitter, and follow us on Twitter or x.com. It's really weird saying that still. And Instagram, Pat's 300 level pod, and follow us on YouTube as well. And thank you again for listening. And we'll look forward to talking to you next week, hopefully with the Patriots win over the Jets, and then previewing the up and coming Dallas Cowboys game, which will be a very interesting and pretty challenging game. All right. Talk to you guys next week.